So this is called Building Kickass Themes with KISS plus SASS. And KISS is just the Keep It Simple Stupid acronym. There's nothing really technical about it, although keeping things simple can be quite technically challenging. And a key aspect of this in theming is making sure to use SASS instead of just plain CSS or some sort of CSS preprocessor. So really quickly, my background, I'm Brian Dannon, and I'm a senior developer with CSE. So we're an ad agency in Cobb County, and we work with a lot of major brands, Fortune 100 brands like AT&T, the Weather Company, National Geographic, and AJC.com. And so my background is in the fine arts, in photography and video, and so I've done a lot of work as a video producer. I started in the darkroom, and then this is what led me into being a developer. I would translate the art that I was working on into digital mediums, and so then this is how I ended up into the world of Drupal. And after listening to Dries speak at DrupalCon, it kind of all started to make sense, because I realized he was an avid photographer, and he built Drupal kind of to help him do a lot of these same things. So I think that's why I've always enjoyed using Drupal, and it's helped me produce the kind of solutions that I've liked to use. And so to this end, I do a lot of digital strategy. So our jobs working in Drupal is generally to create pretty much anything someone can think is possible, and then we have to do it all together at the same time. And usually after we've successfully done this, something else comes out and we need to add that on top of it as well. And it's just kind of an endless digital mess at times. So it's important that we keep the system flexible so that we can build strong foundations. And in order to do this over time, we want to be able to track and reuse as much as possible. So simplicity and the ability to reuse our efforts are combined to create systems of scalability. So to get started, it's important that we avoid bulky frameworks. So the one I like to throw under the bus the most is Omega, because I've used it on a few projects, and it's always left me in a world of pain. And I just try to dissuade people from using this project as much as possible. And I know I'm probably stepping on some people's toes. I know it's popular. So I was researching Omega for this presentation, and I was like, what does it take to get started with Omega? Well, first start with a 3-hour screencast, and then if you're still not sure, there's 22 sessions and 4 courses, and then you might know what's going on. So I think this is just really typical of a system that's overly complex, and this creates a lot of problems when building websites. I found in the comments, looking at the project, because I was like, how can this sustain itself? And I don't think it can. I found this comment, I think this was from one of the maintainers, saying that there's not going to be any extended effort to expand the existing functionality of the 4x branch, or even work on a new version. It's not going to happen. So, and I think this is just what happens with overly complex systems in general. They'll topple over on top of each other. And this is what it feels like every time I've built or inherited a site build that has an Omega theme or sub-theme. So Mothership I thought was going to be a potential solution. It's got a lot going on that helps push CSS and JavaScript to the footers or configure them. But as soon as I installed it, I was met with all of these drop-downs, and inside of the drop-downs there's more drop-downs, and there's just a whole litany of different things that you have to configure to get it to start working. And in the process of getting it working, I ran into a few bugs. I would go to the documentation, and a lot of the bugs weren't figured out. People weren't really supporting it in a lot of ways that I wanted to use it. And luckily I haven't built anything in a production level on this, because I don't know if it would work well. Now, sometimes it's inevitable. So I've given a lot of talks about using Bootstrap and Bootstrap SaaS. Because it's a pretty well-maintained framework. And the reason I really like this framework is that it's a lot larger than the Drupal community, so it's easy to find front-end developers or designers who have familiarity with the project. And so it's easier to collaborate. Still, just scrolling through the components, and this is one small part of Bootstrap, I just decided to scroll through them as fast as I possibly could, and it took a full 20 seconds just to scroll through it. And I'm obviously not reading anything along the way. So even though I think Bootstrap is at times usable compared to the other frameworks I showed, I find this very complicated. And when we look back at all of the JavaScript libraries and everything it brings along with it, usually you have a huge, ballooning, burdensome project. So I found that it would help me get 60% of the way to a project more quickly, but then the last pieces, especially the last 5%, I was constantly overriding or dealing with conflicts. So the important thing here is to avoid frameworks with a limited audience, and that's why I think Omega and Mothership are good examples of those types of frameworks, because they're very limited to the Drupal space, and specifically the Drupal 7 space. So there's not going to be a lot of ongoing support for those projects. Bootstrap is bigger, so that's why I think it's a little bit better. I still recommend avoiding it when possible. So work with what you know. So I know Bootstrap pretty well, so I don't mind using it every now and then. I know what kind of pitfalls I'm going to run into. If you're not familiar with it, just don't even use it. Unless your team has some sort of expertise that you can leverage. If you've got a team of 5 people and 4 of them know something really well, you may want to use what they know, assuming they are experts at it, because at the end of the day, we need to get something done, and usually quite quickly. So just to get started, this is where, and this is one of the unfortunate things about giving this kind of a presentation as Drupal 8 is coming out, is this is going to be really good information for Drupal 7. So if you do need to build a website like now, or that's going to launch this year, this is going to be really useful. And a lot of the principles will carry over to Drupal 8, like avoiding these bulky frameworks. That's always a good idea. But if you're going to just get a boot, or if you're just going to get up and running with Drupal 7, this is how to do it. So start just out of the gate with a minimal installation so that none of that stuff that Drupal turns on by default is turned on. I found that I would just waste so much time figuring out what had been turned on and trying to turn it off. And this installs a very minimal set of like 9 modules. You can't really do much with them. So, even keeping it really simple, I have to run this whole command. And so I put this command up on my website. And these are just all of the modules I find that I'm using over and over again. So I just put them into a text file that I save on my computer. And then I'll run this once, and here everything downloads. It's a good thing I don't have any latency here on my video. It takes a little bit longer than that. I sped that video up. But this just gives you an idea, like even keeping it as simple as possible, I want minimal functionality. I still need to download all of these modules. And we know it's getting better in Drupal 8, but at the end of the day, we're still going to need a set of augmenting tools to build a functional website. We still need to modify some of the defaults in Drupal. I always go into the blocks and just turn everything off. I don't want my user login on my home screen. So I keep content in the main content section, and I keep the help in the help section. This is for a default. This is before I even install the theme. I add an admin role because, like I said, nothing is configured with a minimal install. So then under people, I have no idea why anonymous users are allowed to create accounts by default in Drupal. So make sure that gets turned off right away. And then with the admin role module, set admin so that you can create new users that'll have full permissions as you ask for help. And depending on the project, you may want to create additional, like sometimes I'll create a manager role here. And then as I'm going through configuration, I'll set up different text inputs in my CK editor. This is really important before you start doing any theming, is using this fences module. And this helps minify all of the cruft that comes out of Drupal. So I was listening to Jim Smith's Lean Mean presentation yesterday, and his presentation was really good. It's kind of like would fit really well with this presentation. And he gives you even more ideas on how to better do this. But really quickly, this module does a great job of eliminating a lot of the nesting and then overriding all of these classes that come up. And it's important to do this before you start theming, because otherwise you probably have theme hooks in your CSS that will break. So that's just kind of just getting started before we've installed a theme. And now we're going to install just a very basic theme. And the key here when we build our front end is that we want to prepare for the unknown. Things are just going to constantly come at us with new scope, new requirements. And as things change, because they will change and be upgraded, things will break. So the less we have going on up front and in the back end of our Drupal installation, the more easily and quickly we'll be able to troubleshoot what's broken and how to fix it. And this is how we're going to limit our variability. So here's just a quick example of a Sass file. And I'll get more into Sass in a little bit. But just sub-theming Bartik, I just took I just created a very basic quick sub-theme of Bartik. And just to use Bartik, I had to override all of these things so that it wasn't a fixed 960 width system. It wasn't too bad. This is still a lot easier than using most of the contrib themes. And I was able to build a successful theme quickly after I reset everything. Here's another example of a theme that I built. The contrast is really hard to read, so I apologize for that. But anyways, using Garland, and Garland and Bartik are the core themes that come with Drupal 7. This is a good example, even though I know it's hard to read, because what I was delivered was a front-end developer gave me HTML and CSS that they had written in Sass. But anyway, just as a prototype. So I just took that off of the dev server, and I was able to match all of the markup in my page template and put my regions in their various places. And within a matter of a day, I was able to match their markup exactly so that their CSS would work, just using the subtheme of Garland. Now, originally I used Garland because I was wanting to use the color module, and that requirement kind of wasn't well defined, so we ended up dropping that. But this worked out well. And then, of course, you can take the system files, which I'm showing here, and just start there and build your own just core theme, essentially. But all of this I find to be a little bit more complicated than my favorite way of going about building a simple and strong foundation of a theme, and that's sub-theming off of Tau. And I don't think this is really going to hold up in the Drupal 8 world necessarily, but it might. It's just too new to tell. But in Drupal 7, Tau has always been my favorite theme. And this is just template.php, because there are a few things you need to do. You need to just quickly add viewport to your head to make sure that as you go onto a mobile device, it responds appropriately and does all of the responsive stuff that you would expect. And then you have to add your primary and local tasks in there so that you can have tabs. And then in the page template itself, you have to add to the tabs the classes tabs primary, tabs secondary, respectively. It's not a big deal if you don't do this pre-processing stuff. You'll see some errors, and then this is how to fix it. And then, of course, I add my page node templates that lets me add page templates based on the node type. OK, so here is generally what one of my page templates looks like in Tau. So I'll break my different sections into reusable components, just requiring like the top of my page, which I'll show you in a minute, the bottom of my page. And I've got a menu flyout because you click a hamburger and then like the menu goes on out. So I have to have that as a separate region, and then I'll use the menu block to reuse my menus. In this specific instance, sometimes I don't need that. And actually, it's kind of an aside here, my favorite hamburger menu treatment now is what the Atlanta Botanical Gardens is doing on their website. When you click the hamburger menu, which is just the 3 lines on a mobile device that's the menu, instead of it doing crazy JavaScript animations, it just takes you directly to the footer where everything's already printed, which is awesome, because then it's really just an anchor link. You click on it, it takes you to the footer. There's nothing happening that's advanced or difficult to figure out. So I'm suggesting that is the desired UX for hamburger menus from now on. So here's my page top. In this specific example on this project, I had a need for a bunch of regions. So I stored them all in here. And then as I was creating new page templates, so you can see here I've got this page template. And I could create additional page templates. And then I can wrap them differently and apply my code in different ways. But The most important thing is, anytime you're about to reuse something, pull it off into a partial so you don't repeat yourself, so you keep your code as dry as possible. And then, so when I get started in Tau and my subtheme of Tau, I don't have all of these regions. I end up creating the regions as I need them. So this is a project that, when I started, it had a content section, it had a header, a footer, and then help, page top, and page bottom. And then I tell it where my style sheets are. And then as time went on, I had to add all of these extra regions to match the designs and the markup that was required. So this is an example of how you can take something really simple and extend it in a way that doesn't end up driving you crazy. And in the end, I still only have essentially 1 or 2 page templates, and then I've got my includes for this page template. And I could easily hand this over to another developer who has some idea of how PHP works, and they should be able to understand it relatively quickly and easily. Whereas if you tried to give somebody a subtheme of like Omega, you're in a world of trouble. So, and then there's my page bottom. And so you can see some of my includes are incredibly simple. Like my flyout menu has just like include this region inside of a quick divider wrapper. So I'll get to Sass in a moment. And one of the reasons I've been using this setup for such a long time is it's only been within the last 2 or 3 months that new projects do not have to support IE8, which has been it's been fantastic on new projects that I can actually build with HTML5. And so Tau was really good if you do have to support older browsers like IE8. Tau just it does their dividers in a way that falls back and degrades very, very nicely. Or you can just rewrite it quickly and simply on your own as well to have HTML5. And just listening to an earlier presentation, the theme I think I'm going to try first in Drupal 8 is the Neato theme, using the Bourbon and Neat mixins. All right, so now I'm going to move into the Sass setup. So how many people here are familiar with using Sass or have set up Sass on their machines? And how many people have never done it or want to learn more about how to do it? Okay, so it's about half and half. So what I'm showing here is just a very basic gem file. So the gem file goes in your theme directory. And this just tells Ruby, and if you're on a Mac, Ruby should already be installed. But this just tells Ruby which gems to go and fetch and install. I don't even think I need to list Sass because it's a dependency of Compass. I could probably just list Compass, and it would just download everything I need when I run the command. Now, the ones that have the dot in front, the .ruby version and the .ruby gem set, those are optional files. And so if you've never used Compass or Sass before, or Ruby gems, you can definitely ignore those. They become important if you're managing multiple projects at the same time. You need to have RVM, which is Ruby Version Manager, installed, so that you can have multiple gem sets on different projects. And you put these .ruby version or .ruby gem set into your theme or your view file or directory. And as in the command line, as you go there, it'll automatically switch and tell you what to install. And then this is just my configuration file. So once, like, if you just go to the Compass or the Sass websites, and it'll tell you how to get everything set up. And there's like a command you run. It says, Compass initiate a new project. It'll spit these out for you. But they're really easy to read, and they're not that long. And the important thing is just configuring where your CSS directory is and your fonts directory, and then where your include files are going to be for your Sass partials. So just back here, I just want to point out one thing. So you can see I have the style CSS inside of a CSS directory. Typically, I won't keep the CSS that's compiled in my Git repo. And when you start working with Sass, you have to ignore all of these Sass cache files. It'll become obvious which ones you need to ignore as soon as you start writing it. Anything that has the word cache, you just want to make sure you write a rule in git ignore to ignore that. And then outside of the CSS directory, I have an overrides that's just at the bottom of the stack, and I leave that empty. Sometimes I need to tap an additional front-end developer and just really quickly write some CSS, and we can just throw it at the very bottom of the stack without having to open or compile any Sass. So here's what it looks like. I'm going into my Sass directory, and then my gem sets are already created in this instance, or creates them for me. When you write bundle install, it follows what the gem file says. And then it goes and it grabs all of those things and it just installs them for you in the command line. And once that's done, you can run compass compile. And as long as your config.rb file is set up with all those directories pointing to the right place, it will write your styles to where you want it to go. And it looks really easy when I've pre-built a video to do it for me. But it's not that hard, and it shouldn't be that scary, and it will totally fundamentally change the way you think of CSS in a very good way. It makes it much more manageable. So again, it's kind of hard to read this, unfortunately, but this is kind of what a basic Sass setup would look like. And I'm including this because it has quite a few good things. I tend to use Compass, which from what I can tell, I haven't used Bourbon much at all. Compass seems to be almost the same type of thing. And when you are in your command line, you can write Compass watch, and as you make changes, it'll automatically compile your CSS. And it has a lot of the, anything you want to do with CSS3, like if you want to do transforms or border radiuses, anything where you need to have vendor prefixes like -moz. Compass already has that in there in their Compass CSS3 library. And so like what I'm doing here is it says @include background. This is an inline image. And I'll explain that in a little bit, but up here you can see @include border radius, and then when it compiles the CSS, it automatically, with that one line, will create the CSS for all of the different vendors so that I know it will work across hopefully all of the browsers. And then I create quick mix-ins for my media queries, and then I'll write various extend where there's an adaptive mobile class, and then variables. And that's one of the nice things about Sass is you can have variables, so you can define your colors in human readable terms and then use those throughout your project. And so, here's one where I've got an include that hides the custom image, and then you can pass arguments through the brackets, but you don't have to. Or you can show various things. So inline image is a really cool mix-in. This is part of Compass, but it's @include background inline image, and it uses an SVG, and it will turn the SVG into actual base 64 code, so it doesn't load an image, but instead in the CSS it spits out this huge string, and then that's the image itself. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to include SVGs, but it's kind of cool because it's highly optimized. Yeah, so you can use sprites in the same way as well, using inline images in a background, and then you can just reposition them on hovers or active states, or depending on what it is you're trying to show there. And then you can see at the top of this file, I have an extend for the ellipses. So for this field name, I built a style somewhere else for ellipses text, and then now I just get to extend it here. I don't have to rewrite it, and that's the whole point of Sass and being able to reuse your code. Now I do find that Display Suite helps me get things up and running really quickly, and what Display Suite does is it keeps me from writing field templates in my templates directories. And there are some advantages and disadvantages to this. For me, this is a lot faster, and it sounds like with the new console in Drupal 8, a lot of this is just going to get a lot better. But for now in Drupal 7, this is what I like to use.
Do you know if Display Suite is being set up for Drupal 8?
I believe it is. I haven't looked into it for Drupal 8, to tell you the truth. Did this turn off? The battery died. Let's see. It's back on now? Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so once you turn on all of these helper modules, especially the extras, the UI, and the format, those are really important. Devel ends up being helpful if you want to dump your variables using devel commands like dpm. And then you need to go into the setup for this, and you need to click on the sub-tab extras. And then enabling field templates really helps. And since we turned on fences earlier on, we can just keep with the Drupal default. But I like to turn these on because then when I have my displays, which I'll show you in a little bit, you can further override the Drupal markup even more, clicking through the UI here. And then underneath the other tab, I like to turn on view mode per node, and then the page title options, which gives you a quick toggle when you're editing a page, or a display, I mean, to turn off the title without having to go and change your page template itself. Here's a good example of how Display Suite helps me. I'm able to group all of these fields, and I'm using field group. And so with field group and Display Suite, I can nest all of these things, and then here's a group here where I set what it is. It's a divider, it's open, and then I have to turn off the label. It's a bunch of clicking, but it actually is faster than writing templates. And then I can add my custom classes here that I'll use to write my CSS and Sass. And I'll show you how to export this later, and there are some caveats here as well. Everything's a bit of a trade-off. I really do believe that this whole thing of clicking through UIs is going to get a lot better in Drupal 8. I just haven't had enough chance to play around with it, as well as exporting and reusing your configurations. So here's an example of what I was talking about using the templates, the field templates. So you can toggle by clicking the gear over on the right and change from default to expert. And then you can, if everything is turned off, it'll just remove all markup entirely, which is sometimes really useful. But other times you can very specifically write, I want this divider to wrap everything with this class, and then I want it to have a span inside, so that you can create additional layers of nesting, which is sometimes needed. And then, so this is an example of why you would have view mode per node turned on. So I've got one type of content, and it's got, say, 6 or 7 fields. I can then go in and create 2 different types of that content, and then I can change that view mode per node. Or, for example, I've got a piece of content that's got like 8 fields, and it's going to go live. It's a fake go live, at a date in the future. And when I go live, I have my content authors go and edit the content and just switch the view mode to default. But before it's live, they're in the teaser display mode, or you can set up additional modes, and it only shows the preview image and then some coming soon text. But this just gives you an example how you can use the same content type or the same types of content to create 2 different displays, and then the author can toggle between those 2. So now to be able to track and reuse these setups is really important, because it takes a long time to set them up the first time and click through everything, and especially as you start needing to migrate these from a dev environment to a stage environment to a production environment. So no matter what, you're going to have to figure out how to track and reuse these configurations. So these are the modules in Drupal 7 that I use to help me out: bundle copy, bulk export, and block export import. So bundle copy itself, I'll just store this in my Git repo. I just output it. But it's got an admin interface. You go to content types, and then you can export and import content types. And you can select which content types you want to export. And I'll just spit them all out in a project and store it in the repo, so I have it saved somewhere other than the database. And then also, this is the way that you can export and import content types from one project to another project to help you get started more quickly. Now, this is going to change in Drupal 8. So this is just the thread saying, like, hey, bundle copy doesn't work the same way. But it sounds like the console is probably going to be the real solution in Drupal 8, or doing things through the command line.
Have you ever used features?
Yeah, so I have used features, and it's just overly complex. There's like so much going on in features that these 3 modules give me what I need without, like, features can sometimes do some really weird things and give me errors or cause failures as I migrate code or configurations between environments. So I try to avoid it. I've successfully used it a few times, But every time I go back to those projects, 3-4 months later, it takes forever to figure out like which features are doing what and how they're doing it. Whereas this, because it's a little bit more manual of a process, it's less dangerous. And it's more straightforward and direct as to what they're actually doing. And block export import is essentially the same as bundle copy, but for your blocks. And then bulk export is really good. This is part of the Chaos tools, the C tools suite. So you turn on bulk export, and this is how you can, what it will do is you click on all of your display suite and field group settings, and then it spits out this stuff, and then you save this into a custom module directory, and then there you go. You've built a very complicated module by copy and pasting a few things. And then you can go and you can turn that module on, and it will automatically create all of your display suite settings and field group settings. There's one major caveat here. All of that nesting that I showed you with the field groups, that doesn't really carry over, and nor do the expert field template settings, which is really unfortunate, but it's still faster than creating all of those field templates and custom templates. So it's a little bit wonky, so you definitely want to test this out if you have advanced display suite settings to get used to reconfiguring the nesting and the expert field settings. And so this is the thing that I'm most excited about at Drupal 8 is because they keep promising that stuff like this out of the box is going to be fixed, because this has been a really big problem. And this does work, and it is really helpful. It could just be done a lot better in a more code-like standard way. So that hopefully leaves us time for some questions, and you know, if people want to see anything more specifically. I know it's like a lot of content all at once, but hopefully it's helpful. So yeah.
You can make your slides available. Are they available?
Yeah, I'll make them available. I can probably just post them as is to that same web URL. Let me find it. Somewhere in here I had a web URL. You see, my slide deck, as simple as I made it, is still too complicated. There it is. Okay. So I'll put this slide deck at this URL, hopefully by this afternoon. And then you'll actually be able to read through the actual code blocks that I had. And then you can also contact me just at my name. I'm at Brian Dannon on Twitter and LinkedIn, on Flickr. My website probably has some sort of contact mechanism, or it's briandannon@gmail. Feel free to send me emails. I'm pretty busy. I'll hopefully answer them quickly. Other questions?
I've never seen better login. What does that do?
So better login, that gives you a different type of user login interface. And when you configure it, the reason I use this is it allows users to log in with their email addresses.
Yeah, I like that.
That is the main thing that's really useful for it. And if you do ever have instances where you need anonymous users to create accounts on their own, you'll want to use better login for that. And it has ways of doing better security and forcing them to verify their account through email out of the box. But just in a basic, simple installation, it's so that users can log in with their email addresses. And that's something you actually have to go in and turn on under your people configurations. But it'll save you some hassle. No one remembers a username. And then block class allows you to go and configure a block and then just add a class to the outermost wrapper of that block. And that's really awesome, because then you can just add the class, whereas before that module existed, you just have to go and create custom block templates, which is not fun. Oh, in jQuery update, the latest version has been, they did a really good job, because they allow you to define different versions of jQuery for your admin theme. So I'll keep my admin theme on 7, and my front-end theme I'll put on jQuery 1.11 or whatever I want that's new. Because a lot of the modals and C-tools and views, as you're clicking through those, will break on anything above jQuery 1.7. So that's why I'll keep 7 as my admin theme. With the new jQuery update, I can keep it at the Drupal default 1.4. Yeah, Fences is a real lifesaver because it's just so simple. It's not doing a whole lot, which I like, but it gets rid of a significant amount of nesting that happens in Drupal. And if you watch Jim Smith's Lean Mean Machine, he's got one example of creating an anchor tag, and it's like 20 layers deep in the DOM structure, just for like one piece of text. And so, along these lines, this is also why I always stay away from panels.
Oh yeah, I hate panels. Well, after I found this display suite, panels.
Yeah, I've successfully used panels a few times, and to successfully use it, what I would do is create new panel templates that remove most of the markup entirely. And panels can be useful if you have like advanced, complicated multimedia displays where you need to put like blocks of things and more quickly and easily reuse them. But for the most part, I can do everything I need with display suite, views, and page templates and blocks. So if I can avoid panels, I will.
On transfer, if you're into any database, if you can get down to the level of the database, I would think all of your settings in your display suite should be able to just be exported and imported.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to do it. Like everything is possible usually in a developer mindset. I just haven't had the time. I like using the contra modules because then if there's a problem or as things change, that burden is on the community as opposed to just myself. But and I haven't even looked as into like bulk export with display suite. That's probably a noted bug, but I haven't even had time to look yet. So probably the best course of action would be, first looking up that, trying to find where it's noted as a bug. There's likely already a patch even. Who knows? I'm not even using the dev branch of that module. I could probably just upgrade to the dev branch and it might fix it. And then beyond that, probably just, if there's nothing yet, then create a patch.
Did I get my question out? I was talking about if you had to move your settings from your dev set development site to production, you said you had to match up your display suite changes.
Right.
And they would be kept in a table that's managed by the module display suite. That would be in certain tables that are specifically created by display suite. And I'm saying just export those tables and then bring them over here, and they should take care of all the changes. Should.
Yeah.
They would. So would that be an interesting experiment rather than sitting there for an hour comparing two interfaces?
Yeah, that's a good point. I would be wary of manipulating a production database, but I guess if I'd done it enough times, there's an instance where it could be possible. Yeah, I mean, and that's generally why you would have like a staging database anyway, so you can practice your those kind of changes from dev to stage, and then when you're really comfortable that it's not breaking things. Any other questions? Well, thank you everybody for making it out to listen to this. And the key takeaway here is just as you build new projects and new Drupal themes and sites, try to eliminate as much complexity as possible. Avoid these big frameworks. They usually get in the way. And so, going forward, a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing in Drupal 8, like with the Nito theme, using Bourbon, Neat, and Bitters, that does look very promising. Sometimes that might even be overkill. You might really just need the Compass gem, and then you can write your own mix-ins or copy your own mix-ins from the last project. So I'll close with that.